Hello, how the devil are you? On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about James Bond and the series and my controversial choice, well, probably controversial, for my favourite Bond. So let's get into that then. Hello, and welcome to Infinite Prattle! Unscripted, unedited prattle on everything. Hosted by me, Stephen. Listen, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy the show. Now, welcome back to another episode of Infinite Prattle. Thank you for joining me. Again, if it's your first time, thank you very much for trying me out. Hopefully enjoy this episode with a Bond theme and an espionage kind of theme today. Well, not espionage, we're just going to be talking about Bond, really. And only kind of one aspect of Bond as well. Before we move on, just want to let you know that videos will be coming soon. I'm terrible at organisation, as you may know. And I'm just trying to get everything right and haven't been able to focus on actually, well, firstly, tidying the space because I kind of want to look like a YouTuber if I'm going to do a video. That sounds terrible because I kind of don't care in some ways, but I don't want it to look like an absolute tip when I'm filming my room. So I kind of would like a nice little backdrop, which I've kind of picked my spot, but I've got to do a couple of little tweaks. And I want to do a test. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably pick an episode, maybe the next one, and do a test video of it, see how long it takes me to edit and everything, and then decide then if I'm going to actually pursue the video, which I think I will because I've downloaded some expensive video editing equipment, well, software, so probably should follow that through. I don't do things in the right order. Anyway, thank you for joining me. Thank you to the listeners that are returning. Thank you very much, all three of you. Yes, so today, Bond. A staple that I grew up with when I was a kid, I think. Bond films, when I was very young, it was kind of like they were on quite regularly, like Saturday afternoon, edited versions, obviously. And they were used quite a lot back in the day when I was growing up as like filler films, I think, if they hadn't really got, during the year, just to add to like a Saturday night schedule, a Friday night schedule, maybe a Sunday night film, and generally if there was something going on the other side, so I don't want to say there was like a sporting event, they throw a Bond film on, because back in the day it took longer for films to come to terrestrial television. We didn't obviously have all the streaming platforms, so yeah, you had to wait a good few years for a premiere of a film that had been in the cinema. Because remember when I grew up, there was VHS and physical format media, and they had to produce that shit. So yeah, a film would come out, and then maybe a year later you get the VHS rentals, then you could buy it, and then it would probably take like another 2 years, maybe a year. 2 years was normally a minimum for it to come on TV, and it was normally a Christmas time or a holiday season. That they would do that generally at Christmas. Like Christmas was the bonanza of premieres. So Bond films were quite a staple when I grew up, of just a filler, but also the premieres were a big thing at Christmas as well later on. And I grew up in the era when I was very young. It was the Timothy Dalton era, and when I was probably at the age where I was like seeing them when they were released, because there was a bit of a gap between Timothy Dalton and the next Bond. So when the next Bond took over, I was like 12 years old. So I was at the point where I could see them on TV, maybe even go to the cinema to watch them. So yeah, there's been quite a few Bonds over the years. There's been a total of 7, and you might be like, 7? Are you joking? There has not been 7. There are 6 James Bonds. Well, actually, there has been 7. So you've got a couple of erroneous ones. So the film company Eon, which were, I think they were Metro Goldwing. What are they called? Not Goldwing. What were they called? Goldwyn Mayer Pictures. Metro Goldwyn Mayer Pictures. But they held the rights to the regular Bond. I think they hold the rights to the two erroneous ones as well now, from what the internet tells me. But I believe that it was Metro and Goldwyn Mayer Pictures, which distributed Eon's series of James Bond from the Ian Fleming novels, or adaptations of. And there is 6 official Eon Bonds, but a 7th in another one. So you might be knowing what I'm talking about. So the first Bond, the first original Bond, the very, very first Bond was the late great Sean Connery, and he took the helm in 1962, and I think it was Dr. No was the first one. Was it Dr. No? I'm pretty sure it was. I'm pretty sure the first outing was Dr. No. Yes, it was Dr. No. 1962, Dr. No, and it was a massive hit. It was a massive hit. It cost like £1 million to make, or $1 million to make. 7 in today's ish money, 9 million ish dollars. And in today's money, it took like $440 million. So that's a lot of moolah. So it was a massive hit. So they're obviously going to make another one. So they made another one straight away, and they pretty much made one a year, basically, for the next 4 years. So 62, 63, 64, 65, all Sean Connery, Dr. No, Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, and then there was a bit of a break. You Only Live Twice was in 1967, and that was the Sean Connery era. And then George Lazenby took over for Her Majesty's Secret Service in 1969, which I had in my brain like that it was the first one, but it wasn't. And I've literally seen that film once, I think, and I wasn't really paying attention. And I want to say it's my least favorite film, but I don't think that's given it the chance it deserves, because I think I've seen it once, and I can't even remember how it goes. I can't remember the storyline or anything. I think I remember a skiing scene in it, potentially, but that's a lot of Bond films, I suppose. Yes, so George Lazenby only did one Bond film, and everyone says he's the only one that did one Bond film. That's not quite correct. I'll get to it, honestly. Excuse me, I keep coughing. I am muting myself because I don't want to cough down the microphone. So then, after George Lazenby, Sean Connery came back again for Diamonds Are Forever, and then Roger Moore took over. So Sean Connery came back in 1971, so a couple of years after George Lazenby. And I think George Lazenby's Bond was not a hit, and everyone demanded Sean Connery back, and he came back. Another smash hit. And when you look at the budget and stuff, so the budget had gone up for like Her Majesty's Secret Service was like $7 million in like which would be about 37 in today's money. I think these figures are from like 2005 ish currency translations. 7 million to make, and it took 291 million. 64 back in the day, but equivalent of 291 million. And so that was a big drop, considering all the other ones in today's money had taken well over $500 million, which is crazy. Back in the day as well, 60s. That's mental. So when George Lazenby took over, they like halved the amount of money they were making, and so when Sean Connery came back, it like doubled the takings again. So quite crazy. So yeah, so 1973, Roger Moore took over, really camp James Bond, to be honest. Sean Connery was like, throwaway corny lines and stuff, but he was quite a hardcore kind of James Bond, I think. Roger Moore took over, and he kind of camped it up a little bit, and Roger Moore did like a lot of films in a row, and I think he actually did the most. Like, Sean Connery did like 6 official James Bond films, and Roger Moore did, I want to say 7. So he was James Bond from like 1972, 1973, should I say, all the way to 1985, and then Timothy Dalton took over. I'll announce it now. Timothy Dalton, shock horror, is my favorite Bond. And I don't know what's about him. I just think he's got. I think for me, he's a combination of like what Pierce Brosnan kind of brought to it. He's got the kind of like throwaway lines as well, but he's also got that hardcore chiseled look. So he's attractive. He's got the campy lines like Roger Moore had. He's a bit hardcore like Sean Connery. He can be stern faced when he needs to be. He's got the charm of what Pierce Brosnan brought to it, but he's also a bit hardcore, which I think was what Daniel Craig brought to the role. Because then films went a bit harder and more realistic, and he still has all the gadgets. And I think for me, it's not just Timothy Dalton being for me the best Bond. It's them films. But the films I think don't really give him the platform to have been everyone's best Bond, and I think that's the problem. I think when anyone looks at them films, the storylines aren't maybe as good as they could be. The budgets maybe weren't, even though they were a lot more than like we're getting into the 80s, late 80s now, when budgets are increasing, and the budgets back I think for them films were like 40 odd million a pop kind of thing, and their returns didn't really kind of match the earlier films. But the set pieces and stuff are still brilliant. I just think the stories were a bit lacking, in maybe the intricacies, and I think maybe because they did go from like Roger Moore to Timothy Dalton, they were going for that kind of still having that little bit of edge of humor, but more of this is James Bond. He's an actual like person with feelings, and he feels, and he's quite hardcore. And I think they were a bit more bloody than some of them had been previously as well. I very very vividly remember, and I think it's from the License to Kill. I'm not sure. Maybe the Living Daylights, but was when they throw someone into like a fan or something, and it like chops them up. You don't really see it, but it's quite like as a kid, you're like, Jesus Christ! Like they were just bloody throwing that guy through like a chopping fan. I'm pretty sure it's that film. My License to Kill for me is the best one he did. Like spoiler alert, from my own memory, he basically loses his license to kill. I think he's accused of something or not doing his job right or something. I can't remember. Not being a good secret agent, and basically M takes his license to kill off him, so he revokes his 00 status, and he becomes a rogue agent. And but secretly M and Q are helping him. I think Q's helping him. I don't think ever M really is. I think it was Q that's like feeding him some gadgets and shit like that. And for me, it's a brilliant film. And yeah, so he is my favorite Bond. So abuse me in the comments, please. So yeah, so Pierce Brosnan took over from him in '95. There was like a 6 years hiatus of Bond, which I think is like the longest gap since like the franchise started for Eon, and the actual film company itself. So there was like a 6 year gap, and then I think the biggest gap from that then is when Daniel Craig took over, and there was like a 4 year gap. But there was a few years between each Pierce Brosnan film. There was at least 2 years between each one. And I think the Daniel Craig one, I think the last one he did, I think that was a 6 year gap between Spectre and No Time to Die, because I think there was a bit of whether Daniel Craig would come back and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, so Pierce Brosnan did that until 2002. So he managed to squeeze in 4 films in 7 years, which is pretty good, really. And his films had massive, huge budgets compared to the original ones. And made all right, made back one that, they were hits, I would suppose, that you would call them. Casino Royale, again, had big budgets, and they really did gross a lot more money. That like they were up there. But I think like the last one, No Time to Die, I think it would probably be called a hit. It made back like double its money, but for a big grossing film like that, should it be making more than that? I don't know. And I like the Daniel Craig ones, I do. But for me, there's a formula for James Bond. He is this hardcore, and I've never really read any of the books. I've listened to a couple of them on audiobook, but I've never really read them like in hand kind of thing, and only listened to a couple of them. But for me, from seeing the films, and my experience is solely based on the film, so please don't shout at me too much. James Bond is a womanizer, a misogynist, but he also has this like soft side, and he does care, and you see that a little bit in the Daniel Craig thing. I liked that aspect that they brought in. But he at the end of the day, he's this spy and he's a killer and he has a job to do and he's incredibly good at that job. Um, but it's also there should be campy moments in it. There should be these throwaway lines. There should be, you know, gadgets. Like James Bond is gadgets. Like, and I think for me, the Daniel Craig era, even though there was some gadgets, there weren't enough of like outlandish ones. Like Pierce Brosnan's era kind of took that very much with sponsorship as well. Let's say, but, you know, the whole phone that then flipped open. Was it a Sony or a Nokia phone? I can't remember. And he could control the BMW, and that was controversial, wasn't it? The fact they went to BMW and came away from Aston Martin, which thankfully Daniel Craig's James Bond was reinstated as they should be with an Aston Martin. But yeah, I liked that Daniel Craig was more gritty, and I liked that whole side of it, and kind of bringing back almost what I liked about, you know, Timothy Dalton's character. I think I should rate. I think I should rank them, shouldn't I? Oh my god! Before I do that, I'll talk about a couple of the non-official films. So, Sean Connery's last film was in 1971, Diamonds Are Forever, but he actually reprised the role in 1983. I want to say, and that was a non-Eon production who held some rights for the films. So they actually held some of the rights for the James Bond. I don't know how. I don't know the ins and outs of it. I've not researched that deep. But he actually came back again for a film called Never Say Never Again, and I believe that was 1983. It wasn't 1983, and basically how that came about was. The production company basically held the rights for that film, and they managed to basically, it was a remake of Thunderball, so it was kind of like a reimagining of Thunderball, I believe. Again, from what I'm reading on the internet, and they kind of held some sub rights for it, so they could then take it and kind of remake their own film. And they asked, and it is James Bond. It is a James Bond film. They say James Bond in it, and it has Blofeld and all that sort of stuff in it, but. It's not classed as like a canon film, if you want to say that. It's kind of like a film that someone made, and you know, I can't really remember it. I think when I saw it as a kid, like you don't really think about these things. You see a James Bond film, and it has kind of all the touches of James Bond, and I'm pretty sure that it has like the James Bond style openings and stuff. I'll have to Google that. I'm pretty sure it does. And before that, the only person to play it solely once as well was David Niven in 1967. So George Lazenby and David Niven both played James Bond once, but the David Niven in 1967 was Casino Royale, and it was kind of like done like a spoof film, so like a bit of a comedy and stuff. And again, I've seen that one as a kid, and I didn't like it. Because I was like, this isn't a James Bond film. It's like a comedy. That's not what it's about. Like, there's meant to be like some campy laughs and stuff like that, but this is not what it's about. So, I'd like to actually revisit that as an adult, because I've never seen that as an adult. I don't think so. It'd be kind of cool to kind of revisit that and see what that was about. But yeah, let's rate them. Let's bring this to a conclusion. So, my favorite number one. Timothy Dalton. Yeah, and I'm not gonna do George Niven and David Niven in this, because I don't think he counts. Sean Connery does, because he was Bond in the canon. So Timothy Dalton number one for me. Number two, it's difficult because I absolutely adore Roger Moore's Bond. Oh dear, but oh god. But I think the way that Sean Connery portrayed him was genius as well. So it's gotta be. Probably, if you don't ask me this tomorrow, I'd probably get the order wrong that I said. So I feel it's gotta be Timothy Dalton as number one, Sean Connery as number two, Roger Moore as number three, David David Craig? Craig David? That's not right. Daniel Craig is number 4. Pierce Brosnan is number 5. Wow. Oh, should he be higher? No, because I'm not going to base it off the films. I have nostalgia for them films because I grew up with them. Yeah, he's going to have to be number 5. Sorry, Pierce. Sorry, dude. Really love your films, but I've got to put Daniel Craig above you, I think. And it's not too low for Daniel Craig. Oh my God. And George Lazenby's got to be last just because I literally have seen that film once when I was a kid. And I don't think I've ever seen it as an adult. And I really must revisit that one as well because I'm pretty sure it's not as shit as everyone always makes out in the memory I have in my brain. Oh my God, like, did I just rank them like that? Oh no. Well, I have now, haven't I? I've done it. It's over. I've done it. I can't come back from that. I've done it. And that is how I rank the James Bonds. Bonkers. And on that bombshell, thank you very much for listening. Do all the usual stuff that people do when they like someone. And I thank you very much for listening. And until next time, keep prattling. You've been listening to Infinite Prattle. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, go back and listen to some others. And please continue to listening. Your support is muchly appreciated. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I'll speak to you all again soon. Take care.